and welcome to the Moving Forward Talk Show. I'm your host, Jennifer Collins, along with my friends, Kristi and Emily. And our aim here at the Moving Forward Talk Show is to demonstrate that life goes on and healing happens as long as you keep moving forward, even as you exit a high-demand group. This week, our topic is entertainment and how our ideas about choosing entertainment have changed, what our life used to be like when we were part of a high control group and what it is like now as we make our own decisions rather than following the dictates of perhaps a false prophet or a pastor who likes to just tell you exactly what you must do and must not do each week. So this is going to be one of our more free-form conversations, and I think it's going to be sort of fun because, entertainment. Who doesn't like to have fun? Who doesn't like to be entertained? I guess I will go ahead and hand it over to Emily since she did the most part of figuring out what we were going to talk about today. So she probably has lots of thoughts, and if not, well, she can just talk for a short period of time and then pass it off to someone else. So go ahead, Emily.
There we go. Yeah. Entertainment. I don't know who brought up this topic, but it's just kind of a fun thing because growing up in our high control group, you see the inconsistencies. Like you couldn't have a TV, so we had a monitor that didn't have any TV components, but my creative little self, when my parents were gone, discovered that VCR players at the time had a TV receiver component. So if you went to, and I'm aging myself some, if you went to Radio Shack and bought a really cheap TV antenna and plugged it into the VCR and took RCA cables and plugged it into the back of your monitor, you could have TV when your parents weren't around. And then if you got really creative, you could hook that into the back of the office projector and watch it really big on the wall. But then you'd have to put everything back together before they got home. But then it was funny, a couple of years ago, a friend of mine who had been in our group for 31 years, I discovered that they had a TV, but they just hid it in the closet before any church people came because they lived about an hour away from church. So it was out most of the time because there was no real threat about church people showing up. So I'm curious, even for the listeners, please share like what kind of weird idiosyncrasy, like, oh, we're going to hide this, we're going to do this, or with these weird rules that you had around entertainment that it was really bad, but we'd find ways to do it. I was telling a story about bowling. You couldn't go bowling because, they drink there, and at the time they'd smoke in the bowling alleys. But this one time a year, we'd have this kind of festival, Winter Whirl, and my grandma loved bowling. She wasn't in our group. She was a quote-unquote normal Christian, and she's even got bowling trophies in her house, right? So we could go bowling with grandma, but only at like 2:00 in the afternoon during this carnival because people really wouldn't be drinking and wouldn't be smoking and they wouldn't be, carousing in the bowling alley. So it was a little bit safer then, but don't tell anybody or, go to movies, but only do it when you're on vacation and nobody could see you coming out of a movie theater. But anyway, yeah, entertainment. I love music. I watch less TV now that it's not forbidden than I did when it was forbidden.
I didn't grow up in the Message, of course. And so we always had a TV in our house. We ate dinner on TV trays and we watched, an episode of Star Trek, or my dad really liked Home Improvement, something like that. Me and my brother were always outside when we were kids, so we weren't really like the sit around and watch TV thing. My brother liked video games. I have zero coordination for that, like on a console, so I don't do that. When I came into the Message, my husband's family, they were like the kind of people that would get a TV and then get convicted and throw it out, and then get a TV, get convicted and throw it out. I know that that's kind of like a fairly normal occurrence in the Message. Now that I've left and I've talked to other ex-Message people, that happens a lot. So he kind of had this confusion about it when he was a kid. When I came into the Message and when we were dating, it was kind of like this weird sort of casual thing that we weren't sure what we should do. By the time we got married, we kind of settled down into, like, we can have a monitor, like a television, and we'll watch, wholesome things on DVD, but we're not going to have cable. We didn't go to the movie theater. We did actually go to a movie when we were dating, but I didn't. This was before I knew that you couldn't go to the movie theater. And I just invited him to go with me, and he went with me. Didn't say anything about it. Like, I had no idea it was like a taboo thing. So yeah, like entertainment around television, in the sect that we were in, it was discouraged, especially television. Now, everybody had DVDs or like VHS tapes, and everybody had a monitor, and it was really popular to have it like hidden in like one of those TV armoire things, so you can't see it when you walk in the door. And then there were a lot of people who had it and they like would hide it in the closet. I actually had a friend one time, I was like, why don't you just like leave it? Because she had it in the TV armoire. And then she would take it out, unplug it, and put it in a closet. And I said, why are you doing that? You can just leave it in there. And she said she doesn't like to leave it plugged in because she's worried that evil spirits will come into her home with the television in the home. And I'm like, it's still in your home. It's just not plugged in, but whatever. So yeah, it was just like this weird sort of, there's not any one set solid way people do it. I know that there's some people in the message that have cable, they have television. So it's just all over the place. But it definitely is a thing that's like kind of taboo. There's not a lot of people who are like, yes, I watched that movie. They're very more not like, doing it on the sly.
I'm laughing, Christy, because you're describing my family when you talk about the people who went to the movies and had the TV. We had the big screen. We had the cable or the satellite. Yeah, we didn't. My husband, growing up, his family was the family who had a TV and got rid of it, had a TV and got rid of it. But his grandparents always had a TV, not his Collins grandparents, his grandparents on his mother's side. And they were careful about what they watched. They watched the Andy Griffith Show. They watched the news. It was very wholesome stuff, cartoons. And so my husband growing up, his mother's parents were very much a solid influence in his life. And so him looking at them, he saw something that wasn't wishy-washy. He saw something that was a standard that they had chosen for themselves, like we're going to probably talk about later in the show, and that they were fine with. And so that's when he went there and visited there. He saw something that stayed the same. It was solid from year to year. I was sharing with Christy earlier, Emily, before you got on, that my family, because we were first generation message followers and we were tapes only followers, so there were like maybe a half a dozen families I knew who were message followers growing up. All we had was what William Branham said on tape. So we did not have a television, but William Branham did not say not to go to movies necessarily. So the first time I had the opportunity to go to a movie, it was with another message family, believe it or not. And it was Cinderella, the Disney animated Cinderella. So I called my mom and I'm like, Mom, is it okay if I go to this movie with them? And she's like, oh, I don't know why not. I think I was 13 or something. So that was my first experience with a movie theater. And a lot of my experience being limited comes from living far out in the country and not having a lot of money. Not necessarily that we had as many taboos as some of the message believers did growing up. When computers came out, we got a really cheap Radio Shack computer, actually ran off cassette tapes. And I don't know if that played into why the computer was okay or not, but we played like Crossy Road, Tetris, stuff like that off of cassette tapes. And then some stinking thieves broke into our home and stole our itty bitty Tandy Radio Shack computer that no one in the world knew how to use, probably except for us and our little cassette tape player, and took it out of our houses, and we didn't have it anymore after that. So We had to wait until I think, a family member was ready to get rid of their computer so we could afford to get another computer. Because you don't find Tandy Radio Shack computers at yard sales very often, especially in Amish country in Ohio. But anyway, we never had a TV, but we watched lots of TV at our grandparents' houses because our grandparents were not part of the group we were in. And I think they kind of rolled their eyes at how much we watched TV when we were at their house, because we would just binge. We would binge for hours and hours and hours. Sometimes they would finally get tired of it and say, "Why don't you shut that off?" So we would. But anyway, that was kind of what my experience was like growing up. And then I married my husband. He, like I said, he had seen his grandparents have TV and get along just fine with it. And so one of our first major investments as a married couple in our little apartment when we were college students was a TV. And then the second one was, cable. And because, there wasn't that much on network TV most of it wasn't any good, but if you get cable, then you can watch like the old shows like TV Land and that sort of thing. So I don't know, that was probably our rationalization. But I mean, we were big Star Trek fans. And we saw stuff in theaters too. I think it was wrong for him to go to movies when we were dating. I remember we did not go to movies while we were dating, but after a while, after we were married, and I think it was probably through his cousins, their influence on him, we did wind up going to some movies. I never thought it was wrong. I went to movies with other young people from the Branham Tabernacle. We didn't necessarily think it was wrong. I remember seeing Cool Runnings in theaters with message believing youth, some from Jeffersonville and some from like Missouri and Arkansas. So I don't know. And I think like in Johnson City, Tennessee, I think they have a very similar sort of a lifestyle. It's a lot less repressive than what you see in some areas. So it's all sort of culture, really. It's cultural. It's really not, because William Branham contradicted himself and because he left a lot to the pastors to decide, or actually, I'm not sure he knew that there would be pastors following him. He was not all-knowing, even though he liked for people to think he was all-knowing. I'm not sure he knew there would be pastors following him many decades after his death. So, it's pretty nebulous what is considered kosher message doctrine.
You were talking about Cool Running, and I just had this image flash through my head, not related, but a movie kind of maybe around the same time period, Dances with Wolves, and thinking about watching movies on TV versus actually watching them. You'd watch the cleaned up TV version, and then you'd watch like the actual was in the theater version. So there was what do they call him? A deacon. See, I'm so out of that. I forget what the hierarchy is in some of the message churches, but there was a deacon's wife that loved the Dances with Wolves movie with Kevin Costner. And I was, 11, 12. I have no idea. I'm just picking a number out of the air. I was not that old yet. She decided that she wanted to share that with me and my mom, and the pastor's wife was there and other people. And she was all excited. She loved the movie. It was great, yada, yada. She was going on about it. And then all of a sudden, there's Kevin Costner's backside, not a stitch of clothes on it. Everybody was just like flabbergasted because here she is, has her hidden secret TV that she's outing herself in her house, and there's the pastor's wife, and then all of a sudden there's Kevin Costner with a bare backside. I'll never forget, you could have heard a pin drop in that room, and nobody wanted to move. Nobody knew what to do. It was hilarious. So I'm sure there's tons of great, and those are little things that in your young mind, you're going, why are we doing this? It's like the emperor with no clothes, we all know it. Why are we pretending this isn't happening?
Yeah, I remember one time at church, I don't know what started it, but William Branham talked about the 10 Commandments movie. And I had never seen it before, but it's got some, not necessarily PG rated scenes in it. And they played it in church, and like we were all like, what in the world is happening? Like, I was expecting, the prophet said it was okay. I expected something like totally wholesome. Oh man, were we mistaken? Like, I was so confused on, has anybody ever seen this before they played it in front of the church for all of like the 12-year-olds to see? I don't know. It was so weird and awkward.
So one thing I was reminded of when we were talking about our childhoods, and I'm going to date myself as well, before there were monitors, quote unquote, before there were VHS tapes, there were reel-to-reel movies that people played in their homes. And I remember going to a message-believing home, sitting in the darkest room in the house, which happened to be a bed, the master bedroom, and they put a sheet up on the far wall, and they played Laurel and Hardy, and that was hilarious. And then they would run it backwards. So Laurel and Hardy, they fall off a roof and knock down a brick chimney, but then you run it backwards, and the chimney goes back up, and they fly up to the roof. We just had a ball with that, but. The things you resort to when you're not allowed to have a TV in your house.
But someone mentioned earlier, like, thank goodness for grandmas. And I don't know if that was when we were talking earlier or not, but just thinking about, like, we went over to grandma's house and grandma could have a TV. And did we spend time with grandma? Nope. You get over there and you plunk down in front of the TV and you wait for dinner. And then when dinner's done, you go to the living room and you plunk down in front of the TV and you plan your times to go visit grandma when this particular show is on and stuff. And I'm like, what a rotten deal for grandma. She was very gracious about it, going, yeah, these people, like, talking to her now, she just keeps her mouth shut a whole lot about, what goes on in her family. But, like, that was really, really rude and inconsiderate of the relationship with my grandma. Like, what was grandma? Oh, grandma's TV, grandma. Let's go watch TV at grandma's house. Oh, grandma, can you record Saturday morning cartoons for me, please, so I can come watch it some other time? Yeah,
but grandma had a great relationship with you. So I'm sure she got her wisdom in other places besides just during TV time. So one word that came up in conversation recently was gymnophobia. And I actually learned that on one of our support groups. A granddaughter of a good friend of mine brought up that word. And gymnophobia just means having an unreasonable fear of seeing someone else naked or being seen naked yourself. And I have decided I have this, and I guess I'm okay with it, because you were talking about Kevin Costner's behind. If I'm watching a movie and nudity comes on, I'm just like this. And I'm okay with that, because I really have no desire to see other people's naked parts. For some reason, it does not apply to, sculpture. I can handle sculpture. Doesn't bother me. Paintings doesn't bother me. I have a little bit of a hard time with realistic nudity in pictures, photographs. Like, I've not seen Schindler's List, and I probably won't, even though I know it's very moving, it's very educational, and it's a very important topic. And I'm passionate about that topic, about, not forgetting what happened during the Holocaust. But yeah, I'm okay with not partaking in viewing of nudity. And it's not that I would impose that on anyone else. It's just something that makes me feel uncomfortable. And so that's just my little soft boundary for myself. It makes me feel safer not to have to see people naked. It just does.
Good to know. I'll keep that in mind next time I'm over at your place.
I'm pretty good about just, averting my eyes or whatever.
See, I used to be that way, but then living in a half-naked tribe where the hotter it got, the less, like men bathing naked by the side of the road was very common, or men herding their cattle naked was very common. So I think that exposure therapy, maybe it was, or women just topless in church, After a while, it's like, yeah, whatever. It's just another body part. So maybe that was some part of my therapy, it's exposure therapy living overseas.
I've never been super bothered by nudity. Like, even when I was in the message, it just, I don't know. I think it was probably like I'm not entirely sure what it is. I have a friend whose mother was a doctor. And so nudity in conversation was never something that was taboo or sexual in my house when I was growing up. I know that that's not the norm for message families. So we weren't a message family. So, I think that probably had some to do with it. Being exposed to, like, in the medical field and how medical professionals see nudity, it's not something that's taboo. And still for me today, it doesn't really faze me that much. When I was in the message, I was very careful about my own self and, like, not being revealing and stuff like that. But even if I would see somebody else in public, I wouldn't get embarrassed about it. When we would go to the beach or something, I would be dressed, to the nines, like completely covered, but it never bothered me. And so now when I view, like, TV shows or something, I'm very careful about content, because I'm always conscientious that my kids can be watching or might be watching. So I have parental controls on all of our devices. And I typically don't override those for my own things unless my kids are in bed. There's actually, like, this TV show, it's called Picard. It's like, it's Star Trek. It's one of the Star Trek captains, and it's his later life. And there's, like, the third season. I still haven't watched it yet because I can't watch it with my kids. So it's just sitting there on my to-do list and, like, haven't been able to get to it because I don't have the time. And it's something I don't want to watch with my kids around, just because it is an adult, like, show. It doesn't I don't think it has any, like, nudity in it or something, but it's still, that's kind of like my boundary. My boundary really is, I'm not going to have this, like, exposure with my kids. And it's really more content based, not necessarily like a strict no nudity rule.
We got into this conversation in the lunchroom today at my work, actually. And everybody was kind of all over the place. And one thing that I realized was that it's kind of harder for me now that my kids are all sort of an age that they can be exposed to adult content. By adult content, I don't mean X-rated content necessarily. I just mean they're of an age they're able to start making their own determinations about what is acceptable to see or not. And so it really puts me in a different position because up until this point, I've just kind of gone by whatever's safe for the kids. That's what I'll watch. And now I'm having to make more definite decisions about what I find upbuilding, I guess, is a good word to use.
I find something you said, Christy, interesting, going back to the medical terminology and just body parts being body parts. And I think that's one of the real dangers within these high control groups because it is so taboo. So you have these young children feeling ashamed about their bodies, feeling ashamed about the body parts. And if you talk about anything in child safety, it's actually important to teach the children to be confident of who they are and what the body parts are. Because if you go up and say, Uncle Tommy's touching his banana, nobody knows what that means. And, a teacher's not going to be concerned if you're using these or my donut or, whatever. There's stupid terms that people make up about female and male genitalia. And I think it's a real danger for the kids in these high control groups. And I think that's one of there's a ton of different aspects of why I think sexual abuse is so rampant in these groups. But I think that's kind of one of them is because this stuff's so taboo. You don't talk about it. If this is happening, why would you want to ever tell an adult about it? So I know I went off on a tangent, but I'm very, very, very passionate about that. And as soon as you said that, I'm like, yes, that's exactly why you need to be a little bit more okay with it. And that's where I've landed, Everybody lands in a different spot, but that's kind of how I see the world now.
Yep, I'm the same way, especially with my kids. They know the anatomical names of body parts, and we use the anatomical names of body parts in day-to-day conversation when relevant. I think that's really, really important. I really do think, like, keeping anatomy and, like, their bodies separate from, like, sexual connotation is really important, which is one of the reasons why I am so particular about parental controls, because I don't want them to, like, get that clouded. I don't want the like, actual physical anatomy of their person to be confused with this thing that's grossly inappropriate for their age. So I do keep pretty strong controls on, like, what they're seeing and what they're consuming in video form. That being said, for myself, I don't particularly, like, gravitate towards things that are, like, overtly sexual. I'm a story person. I like to find good stories. And yes, some of those stories, especially when they're made for adults, contain nudity. But that's something that, it wasn't like a right away thing. It was something, like, over time I have come to be okay with in the context of a good story. Occasional nudity is, like, a thing. It's something that happens in entertainment. There's lots of variety of reasons why that's the case, but at the end of the day, it doesn't detract from the story or hinder my ability to enjoy something that's good storytelling because it has nudity in it. And it really is mostly because I don't sexualize it the same way I would have in the message. It's not something that I'm worried about my soul when I see somebody's body. And I think that's a healthy transition to separate sort of, like, seeing something with the sin of lust, because it's not the same thing.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. And when I talk about my gymnophobia, doesn't have anything to do with me being afraid I'm lusting after anyone. Right. It's usually actually women that I'm more embarrassed about. And I think there's a vulnerability there. And I'm also really passionate about, I'm almost a feminist. Almost. I'll say almost. But, I hate to see anyone be taken for granted or be objectified, or taken advantage of. I don't want to see a woman's body sold for men to make a profit off of. Not that there aren't women making profits off of other women's bodies, but then that's the kind of thing that comes to my mind as well. But this is kind of a cool segue, and I forgot there was one other thought I had, and that was about body image. And I think that in high control groups, horrible body image for women is rampant. I think lots of women think they are not beautiful. And I think it's really a shame because they are beautiful, but, and it's not necessarily because they cover their bodies, but they just don't have all they have for the idea of what women look like is what they see in the media, because, everybody else is covered up, all the people around them. And so one of the things I read about body image was that take your sons, take your daughters to the beach where there are people dressed all kinds of ways and they can see all the different kinds of bodies. And then they have a better frame of reference for, the way the human body looks, all different kinds of ways. It's not a perfect body. It's not an airbrushed body. It's not a body that's been nipped here and tucked there by AI or something. We're all different kinds of ways, all different shapes and sizes, and all beautiful. So that kind of takes me into amusement parks. But if either one of you wants to comment on that before we head into amusement parks, that's fine too, because I realized there was a lot in that little bit to unpack.
Growing up in the 90s and in the early 2000s, like, the look was as skinny as humanly possible, right? Like, if you saw all the celebrities, they looked so ridiculously thin, and it was unattainable. beauty standards. Come to find out, a lot of those celebrities didn't even look like those celebrities because they were so digitally altered. Like the photos were so manipulated. And some of those celebrities did look that way, but they were like literally sick with eating disorders to attain that beauty standard. And yeah, that was a challenge. And then you go into the message, and I think part of it is because you're so covered, there's a tendency when you put on 3 layers of shirts, you're not going to look like the celebrities in the tabloids that are wearing skin tight clothing. You're going to look bigger than that just because you have clothing that's baggier than what they're wearing. And so when you couple like the modesty and the body image that was like the goal body image, it makes it really hard for girls to see what they're supposed to look like on a daily basis, and just to process what's normal and what's not normal. I think there's a lot of men too, especially even in the message. I think it's probably more prevalent than we want to admit. But men have addictions to pornography. It happens in the message too. And that has a really unhealthy and unattainable beauty standard in and of itself. And they're seeing message women and trying to apply that beauty standard to them. And it's just not something that we can really attain, that anybody can really attain. So it's just this really confusing jumble. So yeah, the more we expose kids and women, and the more we can see normal people going about their normal lives, I think that's important. So just kind of to normalize regular bodies.
And I think back to the taboo stuff, even when somebody is found out watching pornography, it's so taboo you can't even talk about it and talk about it in a healthy way. And why are you drawn to this and what's happening? And, you talked a little bit about modesty, and we talked about in the modesty episode, it's not just dress, it's where are you at? So talking about body image, it's not just about how I look, but what's within me and how do I feel and what's the confidence I have. And I did not gain that body image confidence until I was probably in my early 30s, until I realized I am created in God's image. I am beautiful. I am who I am. There's no standard, beautiful, I'm 6 foot tall. I'm a large of Germanic descent, built for farm labor kind of woman. If you look at me amongst all of my cousins on my dad's side, I am an average size face in the crowd. I have, male and female cousins who are bigger than me, so it's kind of I was just always ashamed of that at church, oh, you're too loud, you're too this, you're too that, the kids can be cruel too. Go stand in the back when we're singing our special because people can't hear me or this or that. So then I got really, really self-conscious about all of that. But moving overseas and teaching at a university with no amplification for your voice, having a very loud voice was actually beneficial, So just becoming comfortable with who I am, I think is just, even talking about all this entertainment stuff and our list we may or may not get to everything on. It's just being free and being comfortable in who you are and being willing to, okay, I'll try this. It's not sin going to condemn me to hell forever. I want to give it a try. Yeah, not really my cup of tea. Or hey, yeah, you know what? This is kind of fun. I want to give that a try again. Whitewater rafting. Been there, done that, tried that once. I like breathing above water. I'm good. I don't ever need to do that again.
And that's another nice segue into amusement parks.
Go for it, Jen.
Yeah. So, and I would say that is something that has changed gradually over the time from leaving my high control group to this time, because it's been 13 years, almost 12 years, over 12 years, almost 13 years. And at the beginning, going to a beach still, I kind of wanted to be a little more private. I didn't want to be on a very crowded beach. I didn't want to be close to other groups necessarily. I still felt a little odd being around people in their swimsuits, but it didn't take a real long time. I'd say, a couple, 3 years maybe. And then it just became normal. And that was a good change. But as far as amusement parks go, amusement parks were never considered wrong when I was in the part of the high demand group I was in. But I remember being at an amusement park with some family members and talking about the part of the amusement park that was a water park. And I knew that there were items of clothing you could get. You could get so-called modest bathing suits that had a skirt that came all the way to your knees, or maybe they had leggings that came past your knees. Or some people put on shorts or culottes or something like that to go to a water park. But this particular family we were with, they were embarrassed at the whole idea. Though, no, we're not taking along. There's not going to be any water park riding. So it was always almost a balancing act of diplomacy to try to not make people feel bad about what their particular standards were, but at the same time, kind of broach the topic in case, hey, maybe we did want to go ride a water slide or two. So anyway, that's where we were with amusement parks. And now we just love amusement parks as much and as many and as long as we can. So we can. Now what holds us back is our health, right? Because, if your neck is hurting or your back is hurting, then you don't want to ride a ride necessarily, some of them.
So there was a short time when I was growing up, because a lot of the girls, I was not in the in crowd, right? But they would love to go down to Six Flags Great America down in Gurnee, Illinois, and go ride the rides. That was their thing. That's what they did. They loved amusement parks. And then there was a time where the pastor was like, he was starting to preach against all this amusement parks and all this entertainment of the world and whatever. But ironically, one of the kind of ringleaders of the group going down to the amusement parks happened to be one of the deacon's children. So there must have been a chat, because all of a sudden now amusement parks weren't really super taboo and weren't bad, and we could just go on business as normal. So it's this kind of... murder's not right one day and then wrong the other day. You don't hide the murder in your closet so people don't see it. There's like this black and white thing, right? It's just talking about all this, like, it's so, oh my goodness, it drives me crazy. But when you're in it, you don't see that and you justify it in your head. You have that cognitive dissonance and you're just like, oh yeah, that was right before, and TV's really wrong, but we can watch this on the internet, because the prophet never talked about the internet. So the computer, the internet, that's all good. YouTube, yeah, bring it on. I want to watch YouTube till, I have one relative that I think I'm on the same internet network, and sometimes I laugh when the internet's going slow. I'm like, oh, they're out watching their YouTube videos again tonight because they're dragging the internet down. But yeah, it's just, oh my goodness, no consistency. And I mean, look at the three of us. We were all in the same group, but we all have such different viewpoints, and that's just nuts. That's just, anyway, I'll get off my soapbox right now.
We went to amusement parks. I don't know that was taboo in our specific, sect of the message, but you did have to have, there was a prerequisite requirement if you went, right? If you heard any rock and roll music, you had to say, oh, I wish they would turn off that noise. You had to make a comment about how inappropriate the music was, just so you can, wave that flag of, yes, I'm still a message believer, and I'm here, and I'm righteous. So yeah, we did that. When we were dating, me and my husband, we went to the county fair, and my mother-in-law was there. My future mother-in-law was there. And, that was just, part of it. You gotta be like, oh, I wish they'd turn this music down. It's just so, distracting and problematic for me. So, now we live in Central Florida. We have Disney World annual passes, and we go pretty much once a week. It's just like a thing we do with our kids. It's enjoyable. We all love going to the amusement park. It's something to do. Definitely didn't do water parks in the message because of the mixed bathing thing. Like, that was a really strict rule in the group that we were a part of. But yeah, we go to water parks now. It's really fun. Especially right now, today, the high was like 99 degrees here in Central Florida. So if it's not water related, we're not doing it between like May 15th to like August 15th. Like, in the summer months, like, we are in the water or we're not outside. So yeah, the amusement parks are just one of those things. I've really wanted to, one of the big things that I want to do with my kids at some point. When I was a kid, we went to Dollywood. I haven't been to Dollywood in forever, but I really want to take them to Dollywood at some point. They've been spoiled by Disney World, so I don't know how that's going to go exactly, but I have such fond memories of that. And my husband, when he was a kid too, he went to amusement parks. He has memories of going. There's actually a funny story of him getting left in the stroller. He's 5 of 6 kids. So he fell asleep in the stroller and got left and somewhere in Disney World at one point. So yeah, I think that it's really, really funny how different groups view this. And there's also times where, like, people won't go because some pastor says something about it in a sermon, but then enough time kind of elapses and then it kind of starts back up again. But yeah, like Emily was saying, it's really strange to think about how when we're talking about like right and wrong, murder's not suddenly right if you hide it or if you do it in this particular way, it's always wrong. So when you're talking about like entertainment stuff, how is it okay if we hide it or if we do it in this particular way and not okay when we do it this other way? It really is kind of like this moving bar that is really hard for people to navigate. It brings a lot of shame and like self-doubt into the mix, especially when you leave and you try to navigate this on your own, because it was so dogmatic and like rules based. But this was one of those things that didn't have like a solid set rule. So it's confusing.
Yeah, the moving goalposts and just thinking about, so here we are looking as adults, but just thinking back of how confusing it is when you're a kid and trying to reconcile this and figure life out. And you're talking about a hot day and water parks. I was just down in Georgia and enjoying a nice day at the river with my fiance and his daughter. And we were doing some fishing and swimming and stuff. And it was kind of an area where there was a fast current, and all of a sudden I see this little kid floating past me on this, half paddleboard, whatever they have, their little surfboard or their wakeboard things. And the look in this little girl's eyes was just sheer terror. And I was just putzing around looking for rocks under the water and stuff, not really paying attention. But then I started to become aware of my surroundings, and I hear this father, it's all right, stay calm, just go swim off to the side. And so then I just see her and I'm like, do you want me to grab you? And she's like, yes, please. And so I swim out to her and grab her, and she grabs onto my wrist, and I pull her back and pull her out of the current. And then I take her out, and here she is in leggings and a super long skirt. And then I turn around, and there's Dad in his t-shirt and blue jeans, and there's Mom in her long skirt and her long hair. Like, what were you going to do? Like, that was a strong current. I swam across it once, and I said, I will not do that again, because I knew a ways down the river that it got really shallow. So I'm like, if it swept me away, I'm not going to go away forever. I'd be fine with it. But, like, what does this kid think? And now, there she is, her beautiful day. It was Memorial Day. She's at the river. She's wanting to have fun. And then the rest of the day, she's sticking around just in super shallow water. So, like, obviously, she wanted to go out, have fun, explore, be in the water. But now she's just had this super traumatic experience. And where's Dad out there? Well, he's in his blue jeans and his, probably, I don't know, stereotypical white New Balance tennis shoes, being the perfect dad. Like, he should be out in the water with this kid. So just that kind of stuff. And I know when we talk about Christmas, that there's a story there, and I will not forget that, even though that's months away, about what this does as a kid and what you have to work through and process in therapy as an adult, because it's so stinking confusing and frustrating. And when this kid probably wasn't an 8-year-old little girl, like, she's going to think about that later, is most likely. And just like I say, the look in her eye, it was just, I know the parents are doing right. I know our parents were doing the best they could with what they had. When you're in it, you think you're doing right. You want to follow the Lord. You want to do all this, but you just got to take a step back and go, really? Like you said, Christy, murder is always wrong. Why do we have these moving goalposts, and why are we doing this to our kids? And I think that's one of the main driving forces of why I'm on this podcast, is because the madness just needs to stop.
Wow. Yes, definitely, Emily. Madness needs to stop. When it comes down to life or death, sink or swim, literally, water safety is huge and important. And by all means, get your babies in the pool with a swim instructor. Get them safe with water. Whatever. And I use the term babies loosely. I know that you may want to wait till your kids are 2 or whatever, where they can communicate well with their instructor. But absolutely, and be present with your children in the water. Be appropriately dressed so that you can keep them safe. That's. God does not want children to die by drowning because of the clothing that they're wearing or because of the clothing their parents are wearing. Absolutely not. We know of someone who did die by drowning, swimming in blue jeans, a young man in his 20s.
Yeah, I know of someone who was in their late teens, the next state over, that died swimming in his jeans, and it's traumatic. It's terrible.
That's sort of a heavy topic to get into that I didn't plan to get into in entertainment.
That's the fun part about this podcast, though, is people are just listening to us have a chit chat, and hopefully they find it interesting.
And I know that not every family in those high control groups follows all of those guidelines to a T. I know there are young women who go away on vacation and they wear shorts, and they have fun in the water. And it's one of those cases where it's not murder, it's not something that, it is okay, it is okay. And their family acknowledges that it is okay sometimes. But they just haven't realized that it's actually okay all the time. Where murder is not. Murder's never okay. There's never an okay time to murder. We could make, that's another topic for another day about, non-resistance and so forth. Because, I did go to an Amish school. But, like that, there are other things that some people act like are a horrible sin, like playing with dice or face cards, as we used to call them, playing cards with faces on them. And then there's that nebulous standard that changes maybe from community to community, from state to state. And so it's all over the place. It's all over the board. No pun intended. About board games, about card games, about dice games. So why don't we do our usual flow with that, where we talk about where we were and maybe where we are and kind of how we came to that. And then if other stories happen along the way, so much the more fun. Talking about games, because I grew up in an Amish community, even though I wasn't Amish, instead I was a follower of our high control group. We really never had any specific doctrines about what to do with games. We didn't have any regulations about not using dice. We didn't have any regulations about not using playing cards, although the Amish people didn't use playing cards. I remember being at my mom's best friend's house, and she had children our age, and they wanted to play Go Fish with a deck of playing cards. And I didn't know they were okay. So I'm like, is this okay, Mom? She's like, yeah, go ahead. Don't embarrass me in front of my best friend. But it was one of those confusing times where it's like, what's right, what's wrong, and why. And just because these people weren't Amish, like the people I was normally around, they had playing cards, and playing with the playing cards was okay. And there was no specific quote against it that I know of. So yeah, we never had any rigmarole about games, but a lot of people in our circle did.
When I came into the message, I didn't have any baggage about games. I didn't know that they were problematic. But everyone in our circle, normal playing cards were not a thing. Nobody used them. I think William Branham said something on tape about playing cards at some point. I don't know the specific quote or like the specific doctrine that followed that. But nobody used playing cards. But Uno cards were okay. And if a board game contained cards, that was okay. But just like a normal deck of 52 was not. So you learn that pretty quick. The big thing that was different in the sect that I was in was no one used dice. Even if a game came with dice, the dice were discarded immediately. And you would replace it with either like a set of numbered cards that would be drawn or with a spinner. There were, people would go and make nice spinners or like buy, like replacement spinners for other games to include in like a game of Monopoly would have a spinner. So that was really strange. But board games, I have so many good memories of playing board games with message believing families that we knew. Just because it was such a nice time for camaraderie. It's something to do. You get to let off steam. One of our favorite games that we played was Apples to Apples, but you usually couldn't play like the normal Apples to Apples because it's got all these pop culture references in it, and like none of us in the messages knew half the things that were referenced on these cards. So we ended up playing like the junior version. It's just as fun. So, yeah, I have really great memories playing cards or like playing board games in the message. I actually still love to play board games. Me and my family, my kids, we go through phases of like playing a different board game every night, especially with my oldest daughter. It's just a fun thing to do. I think it's weird. It's like this weird thing to not use dice. I don't really know where that comes from. I think it's just like the association with gambling dice, perhaps, that people don't use it. But I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, that was my experience with board games.
So games, cards, all of that. Face cards were a major no-no. So Dutch Blitz was the game of choice amongst the message kids. And then I think Pit came along later, which is a super obnoxious game. They're digging the bell and stuff. But yeah, still to this day, like my grandma, the one who we'd go watch TV at her house, she loves games. Actually, my fiance, I have Pizza Grandma and Games Grandma. That's how he keeps my grandmas apart because of stories. That's how their nicknames came up. So Games Grandma loves games. So when I go over there and there's like no message believer relative around, then she does want to play with real cards. Otherwise, it's like Phase 10 or Play 9 or Skippo, but even at that point when I was younger, it's like, oh yeah, they're just bending the rules. They're still just playing cards. So I think one of the board games I had was like Spell Out. It was like a spelling game because you can learn and play a game at the same time. But when you were chatting, I went to the games counter, and I don't even think I can get them all in my hand here. But I've kind of made up for not having cards, and I like to play a game. We play Hand and Foot, and it's one deck of card for every person playing plus another deck, and you have to have different colored decks and stuff. So I've in my travels gotten various decks of cards. And then I've had friends give me cards and etc. But, cards wear out. You want different cards, and there's different feels of cards and stuff. So I guess, we always talk about where were we and where did we land. I have absolutely no problem with face cards and playing cards. And I think the card thing comes from twisting scriptures of casting lots for Jesus's and gambling, because you can use cards for gambling, and it's casting lots for Jesus's clothes around his crucifixion. But there was another time they cast lots to pick some guy. I don't remember what that is. You can drop it in the comments what that scripture was. But it was a positive thing of casting lots or picking or choosing, So again, which side do you want to land on what day? Did the prophet go see movies and talk about them, or did he say movies and TV was bad and you should get that out of your house? It depends. It's like the choose your own adventure books when you were a kid. Turn to page 75 if you want this to happen. If TV is bad, turn this way. If TV is good, turn here.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Emily. I think it's the association with gambling that causes people to shy away in any group. I mean, I think there are United Pentecostal churches. I think there are apostolic churches. I think there are definitely IBLP churches where they stay away from face cards and from dice. And it's just because of gambling. But anyway, you're right. In the story in the Bible where casting lots after Jesus died was done, and it was a good thing. And that was that the disciples were looking for someone to be the 12th in their number, because Judas had committed suicide. And so they found Matthias. And of course, William Branham said they picked the wrong guy. They should have waited till Paul came along, and that Jesus handpicked himself. But William Branham always liked to have the answer nobody else had and think he was the only guy that was right. So anyway, but as far as where I am now, I was explaining to Christy earlier that in the first church that I attended after I left my high control group, there was a group of ladies who would get together and play bunco. And bunco is with dice, and you have a multiple of 4 people. So you can have 12 people, you could have 8 people, you could have 16 people, and you rotate tables so that you're with the different people each round, and everybody brings $1 or $5 or something like that, and then you put it all together and make a first prize, a second prize, and a third prize based on how the scoring goes with bunco. But bunco is super fun. It's a good way to get to chat with people, because it's very mindless to sit there and roll dice and try to get doubles of 1s, doubles of 2s, doubles of 3s, doubles of 4s, and so on. And so, yeah, if you are in a group of people, like a church group or a social group, and you get the chance to go play bunco, absolutely do it, because it is a blast. And if you happen to win, great. If not, you can go home and go, man, I spent that $1 or those $5, and I just had a whole lot of fun, because usually everybody brings some food, they pitch it in together, and it's just a wonderful good time. Girls' night out, right? We all need girls' night out sometimes.
And fun story about bunco, if you go on the internet and you look and some of the historical research sites, there is actually a newspaper article talking about one Hope Branham hosting a bunco. If I'm not mistaken, she was hosting a bunco party, and there's a newspaper clipping about that. So there you go.
There you go. It had to be okay. The prophet's wife did it.
The prophet's wife did it, exactly.
So if you still have baggage, just know Hope did that.
Hope did that. It's okay.
Yeah. So I think we've had a wonderful time talking about entertainment. We've come from all different backgrounds and had all different experiences, but we definitely can see that as we have moved forward, we have learned how to have balance in life and make decisions based on what we think is wholesome. So thank you all for listening. It is so good to have you join us. We hope you found our show both informative and helpful. Feel free to contact us at movingforwardtalkshow.com with any questions or ideas for future shows. We all look forward to hearing from you as we continue to try to demonstrate that life goes on and healing happens as long as you keep moving forward.